Guys, welcome back to second key knowledge dot point in this first outcome of Unit 3. Here we are looking at business objectives. So here is our study design, same as what we saw in the last video. And this is what we're looking at today. So business objectives, including, and then it lists a whole bunch of business objectives. And really key here, this idea of sticking to the script, because we have a list that the study design tells us. So we are going to stick to those ones in this video. So what's this about? Look, every business at any point in their lifespan is going to be pursuing a number of different objectives. So the reality is that this list, particularly for larger businesses, is going to be extensive in terms of what they're trying to achieve and the goals and the objectives they're trying to meet. But like I said, we have a script here, so make sure that your answers just fit around these 7. Okay, so what I'm saying is the reality is that there would be others that exist in the real world, but because the study design lists these 7, make sure your answers are within these 7. Don't go outside of this script, okay? So note just a definition. So if you had to define business objectives in and of itself, there's a couple of definitions down the bottom there for you. The goals are the targets the business is aiming to achieve in the future, or statements of desired achievement that provide the direction for the business and all of its actions. So either of those would work. So if you were asked to define business objectives rather than the different objectives we're going to look at, that would work for you, or those would work for you. So why do we even need objectives in the first place? Okay, so these are what gives the business a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. The idea is that if you have no idea where you're going, how are you ever going to get anywhere? Okay, all of our business planning is based around our objectives. That's the starting point. Okay, what are we trying to achieve? And then the idea is we come up with strategies in how we're actually going to achieve those objectives, okay, those goals, those targets. They're our starting point always, and they guide all of the actions, everything that we do within the business. Now, I'm going to introduce this idea now. I'm sure this is not a new concept to you. You would have touched upon these at various points in your school career, I'm guessing. So the idea is that all objectives should be SMART, okay, S-M-A-R-T. So the objectives must be specific, okay? We need real numbers, real deadlines in place. Okay, they've got to be specific, not too vague and woolly. Okay, we need some specific objectives in place. They must be measurable. Okay, so you must be able to track and measure like the end goal, but also your progress towards achieving those objectives. Okay, attainable, sometimes achievable is used. So the idea here is that the goal should be challenging. Okay, it's got to be a stretch goal, but not impossible. Okay, there's no point in setting goals which right from the outset are clearly not going to be achievable. You know, I've started my new cafe on Weir Street and I want to make, $10 million profit in the first year. It's just not realistic. It's not achievable. It's not attainable. It's pointless. So your goals have to be challenging but attainable. Realistic. Look, this to me is kind of similar to the previous one. Okay. Know what you're capable of achieving. Again, it's got to be realistic. Okay, you've got to think there are going to be hurdles, there are going to be barriers in your way, so you need to take into account and consider kind of getting around or working within the constraints that those barriers or those hurdles are going to provide to you. And then finally, time bound. There needs to be a time set for these objectives. You don't just set the objective and then just say, we'll do it someday. Okay. By the end of 6 months, by the end of a year, in our first month, within 5 years, whatever it is, we need to be working within a certain time frame within these objectives. So hopefully that idea is not completely new to you, but yeah, the objectives that we set should be SMART. Now, let's take the objectives in turn now. So the 7 are listed in the study design. First one, and the one that probably underlies everything for most businesses, or all businesses, I would argue, to make a profit. Okay, so what do we mean by profit? If you had to define that, the amount of money left over after all expenses or costs have been deducted from total income or revenue. Okay, so there's a definition. Profit equals revenue minus expenses or income minus costs. Okay, revenue and income mean the same thing. Expenses and costs mean the same thing. So that's your formula. Now, you would never need to work out the formula, but just so you have an understanding of how we arrive at our profit. Okay, you take away, you start with the money that you're bringing into the business and take away from that the amount of money that's going out of the business. That basically leaves you your profit. Now, profits essential for the long-term survival and growth of the business. Okay, you need profits. Without them, neither long-term survival or growth is achievable. Okay, doesn't matter what type of business you have, even if it's a social enterprise. If you don't have profits, the business is not going to survive into the long term. Okay, over a period of time, the business is going to fail essentially. Now, objective 2, to increase market share, really, really common one. Okay. Now, market share, what do we mean by market share? The proportion of sales that a business has of the total sales for that particular good or service of the industry as a whole. And we express this as a percentage generally. Okay, so if you are increasing your market share over a period of time, what that means is that you're taking sales away from your competitors. So clearly that's a good objective. Okay, and it's a key goal or a key objective of most businesses. What it means is if you're increasing your market share, basically what that means is you're becoming more competitive within your industry. Okay. Now, something to note, it is absolutely possible that your sales are decreasing at the same time that your market share is increasing. And this is a common error that students make. So don't think that if your sales are falling for whatever reason, that market share is necessarily falling. I think during COVID, like most types of businesses, their sales fell. Okay, they were selling. Not all businesses. Some businesses were suited to COVID, but a lot of business types, their revenue, their income reduced because of that. But within the industry that every business was operating, there were some businesses that dealt with it better, and their market share relative to the other businesses might have actually been increasing. Okay, so just remember a key thing, that just because sales are falling doesn't mean your market share is. You can certainly increase market share while sales are falling. I mean, obviously, ideally, you want both to be increasing, but in some instances, some scenarios, some circumstances like COVID, that isn't necessarily going to be possible. The best you can hope for is to be being more competitive within your industry. Now, this is just to just giving you a bunch of examples here, just to demonstrate the point of market share and how it's kind of demonstrated, or how it's shown. Generally, it's shown in a graph or a chart of some description. So here, this is obviously a pie chart, and this shows a particular time. So this was June 2021. The market share of within the supermarket industry in Australia. So you can see there, Woolworths had the greatest market share at, 37%. Coles was second, there was that 28 or 29%, and all the others kind of falling behind. So a pie chart is a common way to demonstrate market share. And this is a good way, when you think of market share, if you visualize something like this, it helps you to understand what we mean by market share, I think. Another way, this is a bar chart, and again, this is showing, again, the grocery market. Woolies, Coles, Aldi, so on and so forth. So this is just showing similar type information. And again, this is showing it over a period of time. So going from 1 year to the next, again, this is important. Business will be tracking, because you're constantly looking. It's not only important to know what your market share is at a particular point in time, but it's really important to know in which direction it's moving. Okay, so within the supermarket industry, Coles and Woolies will be absolutely fighting it out to have their market share increasing over a period of time. So that's just comparing 1 year to the next. This one is showing, again, similar thing, 12 months. So again, it's just a different version of the same thing. And there you go, that's interesting, $90.3 billion. So this is 2017. So these are old figures. But shares of the $90.3 billion spent at supermarkets over a course of a year to March 2017. So if you put it in that kind of a context, if Coles or Woolies or any of the others can increase their market share by just 1%, I don't know what 1% of 90 billion is. It's a lot of money. That just kind of demonstrates by increasing your market share by just a small amount means potentially a huge increase in revenues. This is just breaking things down further. So now, again, the supermarkets will also be looking not only at total sales, but their sales in different markets within what they sell. So this one's looking at fresh meat. So again, you can see Woolies is the market leader. Market leader, a good term to be aware of. Market leader just means the business with the greatest market share in that particular type of business or that industry. So again, yeah, Woolies is the market leader here, and Coles is second with 22.6. Now we're looking at mobile vendor market shares, Apple, Samsung, Huawei, Oppo, etc. So this is mobile phone, like this is the actual devices. You can see Apple sitting up the top there, Samsung second, so on and so forth. And again, this is showing over a period of a year, 2020 into 2021. This is now mobile service providers. So Telstra, you can see, has the greatest market share. And again, this is showing over a 10-year period. So again, emphasize businesses are looking at their trends over periods of time. So you can see that Telstra, 2010, 37%. It kind of grew. 2014 was 45, and then it's kind of come back a little bit again, 42. And that actually makes sense if you think about it. That top band there, other. There's so many other options available now, and they've been encroaching on the market share of the big two, Telstra and Optus, obviously Vodafone coming in third, and year on year they are stealing market share. These TPG, I guess, would be an example, but there's tons now, tons of options. Aldi Mobile, even, there's so many of them. So these are, Telstra and Optus would have strategies in place to try and combat that loss of market share they're experiencing. Okay, the third objective on our study design was to improve efficiency. Okay, first off, what do we mean by efficiency? It's a word that we're all aware of, but in terms of a business context, what we're talking about here is the ability to make the best use of our resources when we're producing our goods or our services. So how productively a business uses its resources when it's making its good or it's producing its service. How well are we using our resources? Getting more out of the same resources or using less resources to get the same result, either of those two things leads to an increase in efficiency. Okay, so you imagine we're trying to produce something. If we can produce that same thing by using less, that's an increase in efficiency. Or if we can use less resources to get the same result, or if we can produce more of that thing by using the same resources. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, put some context. Using our resources wisely, and a lot of that has to do with minimizing waste during our production process, which is something we touch on in a lot more detail when we get to Unit 3, Outcome 3, Operations Management. Okay, our fourth objective was improving effectiveness. So again, what do we mean by effectiveness? That should actually say effectiveness there, not efficiency. My bad. So to define effectiveness, the extent to which a business is able to meet its stated objectives. Okay, so this is all about doing the right things, about having strategies in place that is going to lead to the business achieving stated objectives. Okay, so doing the right things, the extent to which the business is able to meet. So if we're fully able to meet our objectives and we're meeting them, generally speaking, we're an effective business. If we're failing to meet a lot of the objectives that we've set for ourselves, then we're not an effective business. Okay, hopefully it makes some sense. Our fifth objective, to fulfill a market need. First, what is a market? Okay, in the context of, in a business context, when we're saying a market, we don't mean one of these things. Okay, like a market like the South Melbourne markets or the Victoria markets. What we're talking about here is a group of businesses that have similar characteristics, selling a similar good or a service. Okay, so as a business, your target market, if you remember back to Marketing, if you did year 11, if you did units 1 and 2, your target market is the group of customers that are most likely to buy what it is that you are selling. Okay, so it's really important for a business to identify who that target market is, so that you can then focus all of your attention and all of your efforts and all of your strategies in meeting their needs and building a solid customer base that you can then build your sales from. Okay, so market, it's like we were saying before, the market for supermarkets, the supermarket market, the mobile phone provider market. That's what we're talking about. So fulfilling a market need. Okay, so fulfilling a market need is about providing something that is not otherwise available to a market. Okay, so for example, and this is just a random one that kind of occurred to me, that because it was something I guess personal to me. Back in 2017, the idea came up here, but I think they started running these in 2018. Now, if you go back in history, the only way to fly from Australia to the UK, or I think probably most places in Europe, you couldn't fly direct. Okay, you had to stop somewhere on the way, like a refueling stop. Generally, that would be somewhere up in Asia, and then you'd split the flight kind of 1/3 in the first leg, and then 2/3 second flight. Like 7 or 8 hours, and then like maybe a 14-hour flight the other side, or they would stop in somewhere like the Middle East, somewhere like Dubai or Qatar, and it would be the other way around. So you'd have the really long leg first, maybe 14, 15 hours, and then 7 or 8 hours from there back into Europe or to London, wherever you're going to. Qantas, I think this was because the Dreamliner, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, was the first plane that was actually able to fly the entire distance without refueling, because it was a more efficient aircraft. So they filled this gap in the market where people wanted to fly all the way from here to there without having to stop, just doing one jump. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's something like a 21, 22-hour flight. It's a really long flight. People then had a choice. Do you want to do this with a bit of a stop, or do you want to stay on the same plane for the entire 21, 22 hours? But it became quite popular. People just wanted to get there as quickly as possible. So they filled this gap that did not exist previously. Or you think about Janine Alistair in Boost Juice. She went to California on holiday in the 90s, saw these Boost and smoothie bars that were everywhere, and thought that doesn't exist in Australia. She came back to Australia, opened the first one, expanded really quickly, and look at where we are today. So that's just a bit of more background on the Qantas story, if you wanted to have a little look at that. The sixth objective, fulfilling a social need. So this is obviously a key objective of a social enterprise that we looked at in Key Knowledge 1. Remember, there were those 6 different business types. So if you're a social enterprise, then your key objective, presumably, is going to be to fulfill that social need, whatever the social need behind your business is. Okay, so the idea here is selling your product or your service with the aim of doing some good, improving human well-being, assisting a disadvantaged portion of the community, improving the environment, whatever the particular drive behind your social enterprise is. Okay, now I guess what's interesting here is fulfilling a social need often helps a business achieve other objectives as well. So fulfilling a social need often leads to improvements in business reputation, because people like buying from a business where they feel that in purchasing from that business, they're kind of contributing in some way as well, or they're doing some good. So improvements in business reputation then obviously lead to an increase in sales, and therefore potentially increase in market share and profit and all of that good stuff. So an example there could be the thank you business. Okay, so people often buy their products opposed to others because they're a social enterprise, and people feel that by buying from them as opposed to a brand which is not a social enterprise, they are in turn doing some good, and then that for obviously drives sales and profits for that particular business. The 7th objective in the study design, to meet shareholder expectations. So first off, shareholders. What do we mean by shareholders? Now, shareholders are people that own the business or the group of people that own a business. Now, it can refer, like in real life, I guess it can refer to any type of business in terms of you're a shareholder, you're a part owner of a business. But for our purposes, in this course, we tend to use shareholders in the context of being a shareholder in a public company. So in other words, if you own shares in Telstra or Qantas or Commonwealth Bank, so on and so forth, listed on the stock exchange, we tend to use shareholders in that context. Okay. So what are shareholders in businesses looking for? First off, they're looking for capital gains on their shares. That means basically the share price to increase over a period of time. So if you bought your shares for $50 each, you would hope that over a period of time the share price would increase, and then you would sell them down the track once they're at a higher share price. You're also looking for dividends, which is the share of the profit returned to the shareholders. So if you own shares in a business that's listed on the stock exchange, usually it's every 6 months, but it might be every 12 months, you'll get a dividend returned to you for every share that you own. So this is a little bit like if you own an investment property, for example, the capital gain on an investment property would be the house appreciating in value, so that again, hopefully when you sell the house in the future, the house is going to have a high value, and then you reap a return there. And the dividends in that context will be the rent that you're earning during the time that you own the house. Okay, the rent that your tenants are paying you. So if you're thinking of it that way, that's the best way to think of dividends from shares. It's profits coming to you while you own those shares. Okay. And a third thing that a lot of shareholders are looking for these days is for the business that they own shares in to be acting in an ethical, socially responsible, and environmentally sustainable manner. Okay. And that's a theme that we talk about a lot during this course. So that is it, guys. So business objectives, I hope you have a bit of an understanding and some good solid notes on those 7 business objectives so that you could describe them in a little bit of detail when requested to. That's it for this video. I will see you in the next one for Key Knowledge 3. Cheers for now.